Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to one of my favourite people ever. I first met him over 20 years ago, selling out venues across the UK, and he's back this summer from August 4th. He'll be at Falmouth and Torquay and Clacton, Hunstanton, Great Yarmouth. And then on December 10th, a huge show at the Event Apollo in London. Delighted to talk to Jim Davidson again. How are you?
Hello, Alex. I'm doing 30 gigs on tour in between the summer and the December one, because the summer seasons are not real proper shows. You just stroll on stage and make it up as you go along, really. They're not people that have seen you before. They're a passing trade, so you don't have to worry about what gags you've done before or what stories. So it's just, you have a good old laugh. And then you go on tour and think, hang on a minute, what have I got to do here? I've got to do something new here. And also you've got to live up to perception to an extent. You've got to be the brand. You can't go on and be a nice bloke.
They want ranting, do they?
Yeah.
What's interesting about you, I mean, I grew up watching you on BBC One Primetime, and then I saw you live at the Concert Hall in Nottingham for the first time, probably 25 years ago. And do you remember when you toured with a big band and you sang and did the big production show? And then you sort of did gags then, and now it's more about you just talking, which is hysterical. And I said to you the last time we spoke, these books have also really done you a favour that we get to know what you think, and it's so refreshing because nobody will say what they think anymore.
Well, do you know, it's interesting you saying that, because I do this old joke, right, and then it's about the being stopped in Japan by a security guard who says, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a comedian. And he says, go on then, change colour. Right, so I do that story, and Davro said to me, don't do that. I said, why? He said, because it's obviously a joke. People come to see you, this is my impression of Davro, people come to see you, Jim, because they want to hear you say what they're thinking. Right. So you're just not the comic, you're their hero. I thought, oh my God, that's a bit too much to take on. Occasionally I say, right, here's a joke, only if it falls into what I'm talking about, like young guys don't do jokes. Dominic Holland, who's a really nice guy, but particularly unfunny comic, says, bless him, I hope you're not listening, Dom, but he said, no, he immediately distanced himself from me. We don't do jokes because someone's the butt of the joke, and we don't think that's right. Well, I happen to think other people are funnier than me. I like other people to have misfortune rather than me, although the audience seem to like everything I do wrong. The more I get in trouble or do something wrong, the more people sort of back me up. I remember going to, you must have been around then, when I went to Edinburgh and I was packed for a month. I got standing ovations, I made loads of money, and I got slagged off in the newspapers. And they said, the trouble with Jim's show is he's trying to get laughs. And I said, well, isn't that... And then all of the other journalists started to have a go at these critics, saying, how dare you?
Only in Edinburgh could they accuse you of being too funny. That's beautiful.
The trouble with Jim Davidson's show, it's geared to get laughs.
It's a big gig we're looking forward to. The 10th of December, you'll be there with all the boys. The huge show at the Event Apollo in London.
So it's me and Jethro. This is for Care After Combat. It's all for charity. And Mick Miller. And Jethro said to me, you better invite Davro because they'll only solve. It's true. And so now we've got to point guns at Bobby Davro while he's in the wings and say, no more than 25 minutes or we're going to shoot you dead.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to go well.
It takes him an hour to say hello.
Yes.
He just loves being on stage. He's so full of life. And he gets miserable when he comes on. Oh, that wasn't very good. I said, you were brilliant.
Yeah, isn't it funny he still cares? I love that. And as for Mick Miller, I just saw him do that Vegas show. I was actually in Vegas for the filming of that show. He got the biggest laughs. Yeah, it was a very long night, but he stole it. They found him hysterical, and that's interesting, isn't it? A good gag's a good gag, no matter where you tell it.
Yeah, he's a great comic. And he has a unique style. Ian Sludge Lee's died yesterday. Did you hear?
I did. I'm so sorry to hear that, because he was one of the true funny men, wasn't he?
He was really funny. Nice little fella. And not one bit of ego at all. He was great. He just loved being there,
He was all right, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was great. He was my warm-up comic sometimes. He was fantastic.
Well, you used to talk about him, didn't you? And I remember in some of your videos, you used to make sort of jokes about things that he'd do in real life that were funnier than his act.
Yeah, he was great. We're all going. We're all getting older.
Is it still fun standing on stage? Because it has changed and the world has changed. Of course, there's Twitter now where people can call you an arsehole to your face.
Well, that's all right. I don't mind that. it's like a graffiti wall where you can write obscene things and no one knows it's you that's done it.
Right.
I'd like to see some of these idiot people that do these tags. You never see them, dear, because they're all slightly mad.
Yeah.
But anyway, don't forget, Tarbuck and Des O'Connor are going out together, and they're pretty old school. I mean, between them, they're about 300 years of age. He was always a fantastic act, you think, Des O'Connor. And I'm actually in Torquay now, actually.
Are you really?
Yeah. So I brought my boat down yesterday. God, I'm all sunburned to hell. Anyway, so get back to the point. He was doing Paynton, and he had a great little act with a great band and 4 girl violinists, and he walked out and he was fantastic, and he actually came to see me when I was touring that band about. I was going through that wannabe Keith Emerson phase.
Yes.
And he said to me, brilliant, but when's the star coming on? And I sort of got what he meant a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Americans have a great way of being a star. I went to see Tony Orlando twice. I went to see him in Vegas, he was a star. He looked a star. He acted a star. You know, you felt something special.
When you look back on your career, I mean, the last time we spoke was just after Big Brother, funnily enough. And it was interesting last week seeing the news. And again, I'm a big fan of the old guys. Seeing what happened to Sir Cliff, I think is utterly disgusting. And then we look at you and we look at Tarbuck and what's going on. I mean, it must give you faith that finally the discussion is being had, that people can't keep accusing people and it can't be printed with no recourse for these newspapers, because it is destroying lives.
Yeah, well, people ask me about this, Alex, quite a bit, and I always, you know what I say? Go and ask someone who wears a gown and a wig. Now, the other evening, I had as my guest on my table at the Care After Combat Summer Ball, Nazir Afzal. He's of Pakistani origin from up north, and he was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service when I was arrested for Operation U-Tree, and he was part of all that. And me and him had a real good chat about this. And surprisingly, we both agree. I differ from some of my friends who say that anonymity should be the main thing, because if you look at the police's point of view, it's her word against your word. So what they're looking for a pattern, and if they can find other people to come forward and make that pattern, and they look for a pattern for non-corroborative evidence, then there's a good chance this bloke is guilty. Until a better way is found, I'm afraid that if you are accused, your name is going to be spread about if someone wants to read about it. Having said that, you know, let's have it both ways. Let's have the girl who said, you know, he did this and he did that. Let's have her named as well. And so that people can come forward and say, actually, she said this about me and the postman and my dog. You know, and it's where do you go at the end of the day? Is this sexist? But women have to be protected, especially vulnerable women. And there are, I'll tell you what Bobby Daffro did the other night on stage. This is turning into the Bobby Daffro show. He actually said to my guests were Nazir Afzal and Ian Duncan Smith right on my table. And Bobby Daffro got up and he said, oh no, I'm Bobby Daffro. I'm not like him. I'm one of the only comedians from the 70s who hasn't been arrested in Operation U-Tree. And then he said, I bought a 1975 edition of the Radio Times. It's now called the Sex Offenders Register. and Nazir Afzal spat his drink out. And Ian Duncan Smith laughed. I thought, you pair of buggers. I think it was easy for them to laugh, though, because Naz knows the details of my case. And Ian Duncan Smith's always put his faith in me. He's a great guy.
Was it?
He actually came to lunch with me during all that was going on, and his civil servants all said to him, you can't do this, you can't go with Jim Davidson, you must be seen with him. He said, no, he's my mate. He's my friend.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And that's a friend for you.
Yeah, and I suppose it's those times. I just had DLT on recently. It was the first and only interview he's done about his time. The trouble with the theory of asking for others to come forward is you can just have other nutcases making up other claims. There were 11 in his case.
I had a couple of them. Yeah. I think Tarby had one of them as well.
Surely the line's got to be charged or arrested is the point that you should be named. I mean, that certainly would have helped Cliff, because this guy, it was one claim made by somebody who's managed to scuttle off and he'll, live the rest of his life.
If it's proved to be the alleged offence is proved to be the alleger has proved to act in a criminal way to get some outcome from some fabricated story, then he must be arrested. But the problem is, what the police look at is that deters women who have been sexually assaulted from coming forward, because they say, in the end of the day, he's going to have a bigger barrister than me, they're not going to believe me, and I'm going to get nicked. And that's not good. So something needs to be done. Interestingly, I was speaking to Nazir Afzal and a few other people and one of the bosses of the NHS, because although we look after veterans in the criminal justice system. About 30% of the veterans in prison are sex offenders. And I started to go and see them and collect some data and whatever and find out what was what. We weren't going to give them a mentor because we're not qualified to do that. That's what we normally do, give someone a mentor. And I wanted to put a committee together to find out the best way to tackle with this problem. And the prison service absolutely got brown trousers over it, and that was knocked on the head. But it's still there to be done. It's a difficult thing to do. I said to the head of the prison service, first thing you've got to do, if we're going to tackle veterans that have committed some or alleged to have committed a sexual offence, you've got to get the public on your side. You've got to get the public to stop running after vans and hitting them with their shoes, etc., etc. There's different levels of things. And there are some people that are in prison that quite frankly should never come out. But I think it needs to be looked at, and it's such a sensitive subject. I don't mind taking it on because, I've always never shied away from sensitive things. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. These people are going to come out of prison and live next door to you.
Yeah, which is fine as long as they're living next to somebody else. I think that's often the theory, isn't it?
I had a bloke come and see me in the office and he said, I was a sex offender, I've got nowhere to live, someone set fire to my car, I can't find a job, I can't do anything. Basically, his life is over. Right. So what does he do? He goes underground and, crash, bang, wallop. There you go, a rocky road. Anyway, back to more light-hearted stuff.
Yeah, just very finally on the Cliff stuff and your situation, the costs have got to be addressed too. I mean, I hear Cliff has got a £5 million legal bill. He's got about $1 million back, which puts him $4 million out of pocket. I know you were into the hundreds of thousands. That's got to be wrong. It's got to be wrong.
Petriano paintings. Nightmare. No, seriously, and I've never got money, you know me, always, whenever it burns a hole in my pocket. Yeah. But I had some good mates who helped me through, and I managed to pay them all back. But even though your best friend is a lawyer, there's still fees to pay, and there's things called disbursements, which means I'm now making this bit up to get some more. And, of course, QCs don't come cheap. And I had all that team with me, even to try and prevent myself from... Well, to seek the truth, to prevent being charged.
Yeah, and what worries me is if you didn't have that money to do that, would you have been sent down?
Charged, and by the time I'd have gone to Crown Court, would have been 9 months. In that 9 months, no one would have employed me, and I'd have been a mess, family a mess, whatever, all because... well, let's not go into the becauses. People can read it in the book. I've put it in print. But because of these accusations, life was nearly ruined.
Yeah. Unforgivable. And you're back now. That's the good thing. You're back on tour. Is it still fun? I mean, I know you've done jokes in the past and there's been lots written about the state of dressing rooms across the UK, but is it fun being on the road?
It's just some of the places that you go to. I mean, it's ridiculous. That place in Cromer, I mean, my word. Talk about a storm in a teacup. The woman, I spoke to her once. She was a big-boned girl, homely girl, and she wouldn't allow me to take my drink into the auditorium. I was waiting to walk through the audience, walk on stage and say cheers. She wouldn't let me. So I said, well, I'll sit here and drink it then. Of course, then an argument broke out. Not between me, but between her friends and my friends. And I had the ex-mayor of Yarmouth with me. He said, I've never seen anything like it. Does this happen a lot? I said, yes. So I go in the dressing room, take my coat off and put it down on the sideboard, and it had just been painted gloss white, covered in paint. And, of course, I'm the bad guy now. We won't want him back here again. He ruins our paintwork and calls our barmaids fat.
The last time I think I saw you was in Doncaster at the Dome. Do you remember that shithole?
Did you see the state of that place? Seriously, and they blame me. We're not having him back. There was holes in... I mean, that was the most disgusting place I've ever had the misfortune of working. I did a gig once, This is in Horsham. I'm banned from there now as well. And it was on night one of a two-nighter, and the PA system didn't work. Right. And so the bloke said, well, take it or leave it. So they stuck another one in. That didn't work either. So they got umpy with me and buggered off. So I went out to the manager. I said, I'm not going on until this is sorted. And he thought I was joking. So when the audience were in sitting there, I walked on and said, ladies and gentlemen, the PA system doesn't work. They don't seem to care. I said, the manager is just putting posters up on the front window to say that I'm here tonight. And then... and I said, and the crew have all scarpered, so I'm going to speak to you as long as I can. So I spoke to them for an hour and a half, and I said, right, there's no interval, that's the end now, ladies and gentlemen. I can't speak anymore. I said, now I want you to all do me a favour, go and get your money back. And they all did. Beautiful. So I didn't get paid. I went there the next night, and the proper manager had turned up. The PA system was fine, everything was fine, there was a parking space. Hello, Mr. Davidson, everything all right? But when you go to book again, we don't want him here.
Isn't it funny, though? You have to kick off to get things right.
Yeah, and then you have to deal with the political correct mob. There's a guy in Southampton who's taken over the Mayflower, which I hold the record for Panto, and one night is there. And he said to my friend Dennis, who he was taking over from, I won't have Jim Davidson here over my dead body. So he has decided that 2,000 people in Southampton, my hometown, can't see me. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I
like me.
I speak to Chubby Brown a lot, and he says the same, that he can sell out a venue. They don't want him back because they don't personally like him. Surely that's not the job of a theatre. It's the public.
Well, it seems to be. And, of course, the other thing is, now, this is criminal, and I've been speaking to some MPs about this. Some theatres you just don't go to. They're owned by big people that own lots of theatres, but they don't own them. The council give them, I don't know, £400,000 a year to run. Right. So they don't care if they sell a ticket. They're in profit already. What do they care? It's awful. The business is rotten. If I didn't have to do it to pay for those nice things, then I wouldn't do it anyway. So I'm planning stuff for 2020, not to go out quite with a bang, but if you've ever seen political correctness ripped to pieces, look out for the new Dick Whittington I've just written.
Now, when you say Dick Whittington, are we talking Cinderella with an S? Are we?
Big Dick Whittington. And so I'm too old to play Big Dick. So I thought, who's a big dick? Darren died. So I sent Darren the script, and he loves it. And I'm playing the rat, based on the part I wrote for Victor Spinetti all those years ago in the Clean Pack. The script is hysterical.
Wow.
The scripts, and not only that, I have found a dancer who's going to choreograph this show, and she is the sexiest woman you've ever seen in your entire life, and she's going to be the cat. So I'm rewriting the script so Dick doesn't get the cat, the rat gets the cat.
Well, I saw it at the Theatre Royal in Nottingham, and what I loved about it was it has to be done as good or better than Panto for it to work, doesn't it? You do it big time. I mean, it's not some cheap sort of production.
No, we're just talking about that now. You've got to do it big time. You've got to do it traditional. Otherwise, the swearing doesn't make sense. Yeah. It's just a load of people going on sending it up. This isn't sending it up. This is a panto for adults.
Right.
The way adults talk with adult type material. You won't see it in Nottingham. I'm banned. The bloke doesn't like me. I remember getting there once and I walked him around the outside. I said, can you tell me where any of my posters are? He said, we haven't put any up. I said, thanks, mate. And that was the end of it, really. That's how the divorce started, Your Honour. Northampton, banned from there as well. The bloke from the Labour Party came round and said, right, there's an election going on soon. If you mention anything about you're not going on unless you promise not to mention anything bad about the Labour Party. Wow. So I took no notice, on I went, and of course I did, and that was the last of me. Amazing. Do
you let it get to you, or do you just have to find another theatre? What do you do now?
Find another theatre.
Right.
You know, things change. You can't change, but it's a shame the public don't get to hear. You know, they should realise that the person that runs, and of course, you have to be careful of hate crimes and things because there's a lot of opportunity to have hate crimes in people that run theatres, and that's all I would say on that matter.
Right. Okay. You need to tick more boxes, Jim. That's what you need to do.
I don't tick any boxes. I think boxes have to be erased.
Yes, me too. I just left the BBC after 15 years. I gave up. I couldn't compete. Being good wasn't good enough. I needed to tick a box.
I know.
I was just thinking about the Cinderella and the beautiful shows you did on tour and Charlie Drake. I mean, that's got to be one of the greatest clips in history, hasn't it? When he came on, and it's beautiful. Charlie
was fantastic, and me and Brian Blackburn. Look at that idiot driving. Don't you want people like that to fall off that motorbike? Charlie Drake was great fun, and I was working with Brian Blackburn, the writer, to do these. And when I came to do Cinderella 2, Brian died. And I carried on writing in his style. And I've always written in the style of the great Brian Blackburn, who writes like a drummer. So he writes his dialogue like music. And so it doesn't need to be particularly funny as long as it adds up, mathematically. Do you know what I mean? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-diddly-diddly-dee. You know, that's the way I write these things.
And what I loved as well was a line you had years ago. I think the first interview we did, set up by Pat Lakesmith, was when I said to you, do you get upset that some people think you can't do proper pantomime? And you said, well, of course. You know, do you think I'm going to walk on stage and say fuck in the middle of a show of 3,000 kids? And of course, that was the great thing you had. You had two careers, really, in a way, didn't you? The family audience.
I did, yeah.
It was beautiful.
When the panto was put on so cheap and awful in those days, so I formed a pantomime company like you do. And in the end, I sold it to Kudos. But when we put together Dick Whittington, I thought, how am I going to make the most modern, wonderful pantomime in the world? So I called up my mate Mike Batt, who is an expert on projection, and we started to use projection for the first time ever. And this was a huge big panto with music by Emerson, Lake and Powell, funny enough, Cozy Powell. And it just broke all records, and everybody loved it. And at the end of the season, you think, how much money have we made? Try lost.
Right, very finally, before we go, we haven't spoken since Brexit and Donald Trump. Has anything sort of occurred to you, any original thoughts on that, or do we ignore it?
Well, I think poor old Donald Trump, he's a lesson to us all, even though people can hate you. If everyone around you is losing their head and blaming old Trumpy, but he keeps going. America's economy is going through the roof. Fake news, he's had enough of that. Yeah. And, there are a certain type of people who don't like him. You can spot them. Trump hater.
Well, it's interesting as well that, what we did to him when he came over here, despite the fact he's president, if we sort of had an inflatable Theresa flying over New York when she went there, they'd be outraged. There's a double standard, isn't it?
We should have an inflatable mayor of London flying over. But no, you can't have that. Yeah. You can't say anything about anybody else, but you can say it about Donald Trump because he wants to make America great, like Reagan did. Like Thatcher did to our country. But then people who listen to this up north and say, oh, she claws the minds, I hate that woman. So politics divide everybody. And I think that's why even lots of people throughout the political spectrum come and see me, because I just rant about the lot of them, really, all of them.
You make it look so effortless. I saw you in the Comedy Store recently, and you just stand there, and it seems like it's off the top of your head. Is it that easy, or is it just you looking like a swan and panicking under the water?
I don't think there's a panic. I think once it runs on rails, it's very easy to do. But I went on stage, Great Yarmouth, the other night, and I hadn't been on stage for 3 months because I've been running the charity. And I did go into a bit of a panic halfway through. My eyes went a bit starey, and I just started talking bollocks for about 5 minutes until something came to mind. But once you get ring rusty, but once you get on, 2 or 3 gigs under your belt and you're fine. But in those 2 or 3 gigs, you have to think of new stuff and make stuff up and get yourself in a position where you're slightly fresh and let the audience in on it.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute, I can't remember what I'm talking about. That type of thing.
You truly are one of the most confident and brilliant performers I've ever seen live, and what you do for the troops...
Thanks,
no, seriously, I mean it. And what you do for the troops is so admirable. You've done it your entire life. How are they doing? We don't hear a lot about them and the budgets and what's going off abroad because there's no particular war at the moment that we're fighting. How are they all doing? Are they okay?
They're all good. They're all good. And obviously we have a problem with retention at the moment and recruitment. And we've been writing some reports to the government saying they have to watch where they're recruiting from. You can't just recruit soldiers from the Jeremy Kyle green room. You've got to be able to have people that's going to be able to have a life after they've come out the military. And but we have a fantastic new Defence Secretary in Gavin Williamson. I mean, he is taking no crap from anybody. He's doing things his way, and there's civil servants collapsing all around him. You can't do that, Minister. Yes, watch this. I'm here for our country. And that's what he's doing. He's a fantastic guy. And, of course, they can't give me any money to look after the veterans in prison because that's the job for the Ministry of Justice. And the Ministry of Justice say, oh, no, that's a job for the National Health. And that's so I'm going around with the buckets and collecting enough to make sure these guys don't reoffend again.
Oh, they're
Probably
still
the most enjoyable thing I do.
Well, I've noticed that about you, the joy you get from helping these guys. I wonder the pressure that they're under whilst they're in the army and when they come out and they're sort of put it back into society. And it's such a regimented life, and that's what you always talk about, isn't it? You can't just drop people from the army back into civvy life.
I don't think you can, I know, but 99% of people that are in the army have no problem at all. No PTSD, no transition problems. And we seem to concentrate, and charities are quite guilty of over-dramatising things. 70,000 veterans homeless in the UK. Ridiculous. We had to shut our homeless hostel in Southampton because we couldn't find any homeless veterans. It's bizarre, but it does get your buckets filled up.
Is that your biggest thrill still, working with the armed forces?
I was in prison the other day up in Ramby, up north, with the boss, a woman called Kate Davis, runs the NHS mental welfare thing, and she's in charge of military welfare. And her and I were sitting there talking to these veterans, and as we came out, I went a bit quiet, and she asked me what's up, and I said, I always feel as if I want to take them all home with me. Yes, they've broken the law, and prisons are full of good men who have done bad things, And I agree with Michael Gove, is that prisons shouldn't be warehouses to store people. There should be universities to learn how to not break the law again. And that's what I'm going to do for our veterans.
Congratulations on everything. Of course, Dubai, that was a big part of your life the last time we spoke. Are you intending to go back there, or are you here for good now?
No, I've run out of money now. It's very expensive there. Yeah, and the locals are good. The locals are nice people.
And it's nice and warm.
It's bloody hot, mate, I tell you. We're talking today, he's playing golf in 50 degrees of heat. That sharpens you up.
Jim, thank you so much for your time. It's always lovely to talk to you. The summer season begins in Falmouth on the 4th, 5th, 10th, 11th, 24th. Great Yarmouth. But the big tour starts October 17th in Redditch. Beautiful little venue there. Fantastic. Viva Blackpool, Livingston. And then, of course, the big gig we're looking forward to, the 10th of December. You'll be there with all the boys doing this huge event at the Event Apollo.
That'll be good.
Can't wait to see it.
Well, show these young fellas what's what.
How's he doing? Is he all right?
Huh?
How's Jethro doing? Is he all right?
He's doing not as good as me. See you, Alex.
I love you. Ta-da.
Ta-da, mate. Bye.